It is one of India's most ambitious indirect tax reforms, considered to be one of the most important in independent India. And I have one of the chief architects of the bill, the man who will perhaps put it in action, the Revenue Secretary of India, Mr. Shaktikanta joins us right here on ET now. Thanks very much for being with us, sir. The select panel has given its report. It's a property of the House now. The question is, are we a step closer to the GST?
We welcome the submission of the report by the select panel to the Rajya Sabha today. It's a very positive development, takes us closer to the actual implementation of GST. And the Rajya Sabha Secretariat would now forward the report to the government. The government will examine and consider the report of the select panel, and government will take a decision. And thereafter, government will go back to the Rajya Sabha with its proposal. So that is the sequence of events.
Right. You know, because a lot of people were looking forward to this report, there are critics and there are people who are giving you a thumbs up. Many people believe this is a half-baked legislation, this is a flawed model of the GST. The others believe this is perhaps the best we could have got in this present circumstances. Do you believe this is the perfect GST we could have got in the present circumstances, or are you somewhere concerned that this is not the perfect that you could have put together?
You see, the perfect should not be the enemy of the good. The certain features of the GST are based on broad consensus which we have reached between the center and the states. There are few aspects of the GST which have been, sort of criticized in the public space, but they are for limited period. And it's not a flawed GST legislation in that sense, because the government has taken a step forward to have the GST actually implemented. And whatever further tweaking are required, as we go about implementing it, the necessary corrections can be done.
One of the things that the select panel has recommended and the government is on board is amendment of section 19, which refers to compensation of the state for up to a period of 5 years, depending on the revenue loss that they have. A lot of people in Indian industry believe that this was not required because A, you're keeping so much out of the GST, and in any case, the government has been so liberal in accepting the demands of the states on this matter. What was the need to do so, and how long do you see that compensation being made? Will it be up to 5 years? Will it be lesser period? What's your assessment?
You see, first thing is I have not seen the report.
That's right.
So we will get the report now. Thereafter, we will go through it. So far as the compensation is concerned, it was again a consensus which was arrived at in Finance Minister's meeting with the empowered committee of the state finance ministers, and Centre has agreed to provide compensation to the states for 5 years. Now, whether the states will have really loss up to 5 years is a matter which we will know only when GST is implemented. But the expectation is that in about 1 or 2 years' time, most of the states may not have any revenue loss, because the consuming states will benefit out of implementation of GST. It's the manufacturing states which may experience some loss in the initial period, and that may require some compensation. So therefore, to assuage the concerns, to address the concerns of the states about revenue loss, otherwise they have to also manage their budget, the center has come forward to sort of give that assurance to the states through the Constitution Amendment Bill, so that this is, this addresses the concerns of the states, and we move that much closer to GST.
Fair point indeed. I'm not going to get into the specifics of that 1% tax, but the fact that this allows for up to a 1% tax that can be levied by a state additionally to the GST rate is causing some concern. Opposition believes this is going to disrupt the market. An industry believes that there could be a cascading effect. I want to ask from you, what is your assessment on this? Could this really distort markets? Could this really have a big cascading effect as far as the whole GST rate is concerned?
You see, 2 points I would like to say. First thing is that this 1% additional tax is for a period of 2 years. And any further extension will have to be a decision of the GST Council. But as things stand today, it's for a period of 2 years. Second point I would like to mention is that the empowered committee itself has set up a committee consisting of our representatives and the representatives of the states to examine this whole issue of the cascading impact of the 1% tax and come out with recommendations with regard to the minimization of the cascading impact. So that concern is also being addressed.
That's an important clarification that you're making, because a lot of people were worried about that. The other thing that worries people is that you're leaving alcohol, petroleum and electricity out of the GST ambit. They're the big tax grossers. We understand this is the deal this is one of the reasons why the deal was clinched with the states. They were not willing to budge on this. At a later stage, as the Revenue Secretary of India, do you believe there is merit in the argument that they could be brought in maybe with a higher tax rate at a later stage, say 5 years later? Is there merit in that argument?
You see, GST is a complex legislation in the sense that India is a complex country. We have, 29 states, we have center, so many interest groups, so many stakeholders. So to arrive at a consensus, you have to make necessarily certain adjustments here and there. Now, 3 aspects you have pointed out. So far as alcohol for human consumption is concerned, that was a consensus again between the center and the states to keep it out of GST. And let us also remember that alcohol for human consumption doesn't really go, impact the manufacturing process in that sense. So therefore, the overall so-called negative impact of it is likely to be very, very minimal. Now, with regard to electricity tax was never intended to be a part of the GST legislation, even as per the first discussion paper of GST, which was released in 2009. So it was never, at no point of time, electricity was considered for inclusion, and it was not there in the first discussion paper, as I have mentioned. Now, so far as petroleum is concerned, the major positivity that has to be sort of noted is that constitutionally petroleum is included in the GST.
That's right, yes.
The constitution includes petroleum and petroleum products in GST. Now, as to when the actual GST will be levied, it is a matter which the GST Council will decide. So I expect sooner or later the GST Council will be able to take a view on this, and the outcome will certainly be very positive.
There's another thing that I want to ask you, and because you are a subject matter expert here, reportedly there's going to be an 18% GST tax rate. Many people believe this is too high given our peers. Others believe it is perhaps right. Are we on board as far as that 18% tax rate is concerned? Because you're a stakeholder here.
You see, tax rate is a matter which the GST Council will decide. The GST Council will come into existence only after the Constitution Amendment is through. The Constitution Amendment also requires ratification by 50% of the states. So therefore, with regard to the tax rate, it will be too premature to say what the tax rate will be. But certainly the effort of the government would be to keep the tax rate at a reasonable level so that GST is a successful experience for the whole country.
Because this is also a legislative experience, I want to understand from you and for the benefit of our viewers, what happens next? This is the property of the House. This is going to be tabled whenever the Rajya Sabha meets. What happens next, really? As far as the modus operandi of the GST.
No, now you see, once the bill is considered by the Rajya Sabha, and after I'm explaining the procedure.
Yes, yes.
Once the bill is passed in the Parliament, then it has to be ratified by 50% of the states, and thereafter it has to get the assent of the President. Then the constitutional amendment will be notified and it takes effect. Thereafter, the GST Council will come into existence. Then the GST Council will take a view on the draft legislation regarding the central GST law, the state GST law, and the IGST law. Then the central government, the Parliament will pass the CGST and the IGST legislation. The assemblies, the state assemblies, they would be required to pass their individual legislations for imposition of the SGST in their states. And then parallelly, in any case, a lot of administrative steps are taken to ensure that the deadline of 1/4/2016 is maintained.
I was going to ask you, my last question is that we are talking on the 22nd of July 2015. There's still a lot that needs to be done. April 1, 2016, does that look like a daunting deadline?
Administratively, we are taking all steps, including creation of the IT backbone and all other aspects. Whatever administrative steps are being required, the center and the states are working in very close cooperation. We are quite prepared, and we are definitely moving towards introduction on 1/4/16.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.